I don't know. I've always thought, Gus, that I've never been troubled by ego. Maybe I'm troubled much more than I think. Maybe egos come in different shapes, sizes, and colors, and everything else. I look at what I have to do, and the older I get, the more I realize I can't do it without God's help.
At 90, Jimmy Swaggart is finally revealing the dark secrets behind his empire. From secret hotel rooms to million-dollar scandals, the man who once earned $500,000 a day is exposing what truly happened. A bitter enemy's revenge plot, hidden cameras in Room 7, and a shocking confession that destroyed everything. This is the story America's most powerful televangelist tried to bury. Jimmy Swaggart was born on March 15, 1935, in Faraday, Louisiana, a small town with no paved roads or electricity. His father, Willie Leon Swaggart, was a Pentecostal preacher and fiddle player, while his mother, Minnie Bell Herron, came from a family of sharecroppers. Faith was the cornerstone of their lives, and they were part of the Assemblies of God, a church that believed in spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues. From an early age, church was more than a Sunday tradition for Jimmy. It was a place of hope. The services were loud, emotional, and filled with music. His mother sang in the choir, and his father played the fiddle during worship. Music was in his blood, but so was rebellion. As a teenager, he gambled and played pool, but he refused to use his musical talent outside of church, believing it was meant only for God. At just 8 years old, Jimmy felt a calling to preach, and that calling never left him. However, his early years as a preacher were marked by hardship. In the 1950s, he earned only $30 a week, barely enough to support his wife and son. They often lived in church basements or with other pastors, struggling to make ends meet. Through all the struggles, one person stood by Jimmy's side, Frances Anderson. Jimmy married her on October 10, 1952, when he was 17 and she was just 15. Her parents disapproved, wanting her to finish school and build a better future. However, Jimmy was determined and reportedly lied about Frances's age on the marriage license. Their life together began with nothing. After the wedding, they moved in with Jimmy's parents because they couldn't afford their own home. Frances's mother was heartbroken, believing her daughter had given up too much. But Frances believed in Jimmy's mission and stood by him through every challenge. Jimmy Swaggart started his ministry in the 1950s with almost nothing. He traveled across rural Louisiana with his wife Frances and their young son, Donnie, preaching wherever he could. Despite earning only $30 a week, about $290 today, he refused to give up. The family lived in church basements, tiny motels, and even the homes of pastors who offered them shelter. Jimmy preached in small country churches and on flatbed trailers in open fields. Many of the congregations he spoke to could barely afford to give him anything, but he kept going. Frances supported him, managing their home while helping with his ministry. In 1960, Jimmy began recording gospel music and broadcasting his sermons on Christian radio. Though he still lived in poverty, his voice was reaching more people. Around the same time, he was offered a way out. Sam Phillips, the legendary producer at Sun Records, wanted to sign him as the label's first gospel artist. Phillips had already made stars out of Elvis Presley and Jimmy's cousin, Jerry Lee Lewis, who was earning $20,000 a week compared to Jimmy's $30. Phillips believed Jimmy could bring gospel music to a mainstream audience, but Jimmy said no. He believed his true calling was preaching, and signing a record deal would pull him away from that mission. Instead, he recorded gospel albums on his own and sold millions of copies through mail orders. In 1969, Jimmy launched the Camp Meeting Hour, a radio program that would change everything. At first, it was a small operation funded by his own sacrifices and a few donations. However, after just a few broadcasts, he ran out of money. In desperation, he made an appeal on air asking for help. Within days, 900 letters arrived containing $33,000, enough to keep the program alive. By the 1970s, the Camp Meeting Hour was on more than 650 stations across the country. Jimmy's voice was no longer limited to Louisiana. It was reaching the entire nation. Jimmy Swaggart stepped into television ministry in 1975, and everything changed. His weekly program started on local stations but quickly grew. Viewers connected with his passionate preaching and gospel music, and within a few years, his reach exploded. By the early 1980s, Swaggart's broadcasts aired in over 143 countries and were translated into multiple languages. At its peak, his U.S. audience reached 2.1 million households every week, making him one of the most watched religious figures of his time. His ability to blend fiery sermons with soulful music kept audiences engaged, turning his program into a must-watch event. By 1987, Jimmy Swaggart Ministries was pulling in $150 million a year, more than $500,000 every working day. This enormous revenue came from viewer donations and sales of gospel records, books, and merchandise. His organization even ran one of the largest mail-order businesses in Louisiana. Swaggart's headquarters in Baton Rouge reflected the wealth pouring in. The ministry operated from a massive campus that included the Family Worship Center, a 7,000-seat megachurch, a Bible college, and cutting-edge production facilities. The Zoe Vance Teleproduction Center, built with a $7 million inheritance from a wealthy donor, allowed Swaggart to produce television programs at a level few others in religious broadcasting could match. The money also funded a luxurious lifestyle. Swaggart and his family lived in a $1.5 million mansion on a 20-acre estate with a swimming pool and gold-plated fixtures. He flew in a private Gulfstream jet and drove matching luxury cars with his wife. In 1988, Jimmy Swaggart's empire began to crumble. He was caught in a prostitution scandal involving a hidden camera in room 7 of a New Orleans motel. The scandal broke when Marvin Gorman, a fellow televangelist whom Swaggart had accused of adultery, revealed the evidence. Swaggart stood before his congregation and delivered an emotional confession, but the damage was done. The Assemblies of God stripped him of his ministerial credentials, and his television empire began to collapse. In 1991, another scandal erupted when Swaggart was pulled over with a prostitute in his car. This time, instead of a tearful confession, he defiantly told his congregation, "The Lord told me it's flat none of your business." The scandals devastated Swaggart's ministry. Donations plummeted, television networks dropped his programs, and his Bible college saw enrollment drop to just 37 students. By the mid-1990s, his annual income had fallen to $1 million, a shadow of what it had been at its peak. Legal troubles added to the crisis. In 1991, a jury ruled against Swaggart in a defamation lawsuit filed by Marvin Gorman, awarding Gorman $10 million in damages. After appeals, the case was settled for $1.85 million, a massive financial hit for a ministry already struggling to survive. Despite the scandals, Jimmy Swaggart's influence on modern televangelism is undeniable. His journey from a small-town preacher to one of the most powerful religious figures in America is a story of faith, ambition, and controversy. Today, his family continues to play a key role in the ministry. His wife, Frances, serves as the chief financial officer, while his son, Donnie, preaches at the Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge. The Swaggart legacy lives on, but it remains a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked power and the consequences of hypocrisy. Jimmy Swaggart's story is one of faith, power, and controversy, a rise to incredible wealth and influence, followed by a dramatic fall that shocked the world. Even today, his legacy remains a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power in religious empires. What do you think about his story? Was his downfall inevitable, or could he have redeemed himself? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's most shocking scandals. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.